The shadow on the Marina there is a mega structure in Dubai Marina that you can see cutting through the desert haze for miles. 3 colossal towers pierce the sky right in the heart of the world's most expensive waterfront playground, directly adjacent to the premier mega mall and luxury yacht harbor. The development stands over 230 meters at its highest peak. At its base, a massive multi-level retail podium wraps an entire block, frozen in the promises of an architect's rendering, high-end promenades, Michelin-starred dining spaces, and a massive 3,000-square-meter external LED ribbon wall, designed to be the definitive digital signature of the new Marina skyline. The LED wall is dark. The retail podium is completely hollow. The towers are entirely unfinished, open to the blistering Gulf elements on the upper floors, and scarred by early structural neglect. Nobody lives here. Nobody has ever moved in. Understanding why this billion-dollar dream died requires looking past the sudden developer defaults and frozen offshore funds. It requires analyzing the intense engineering challenges unique to Dubai's geography, foundational shifts in shifting coastal sand, extreme heat expansion warping uncooled steel, and the violent marine humidity penetrating an unsealed envelope. By the mid-2010s, Dubai was sprinting through its grandest expansion phase, transforming the marina and business bay into dense vertical corridors of sheer capital. Into this hyper-fueled market stepped an ambitious multinational consortium, launching a 3-tower luxury residential and hospitality megaproject. It promised over 500 ultra-premium penthouses, a 7-star branded hotel, and an expansive open-air retail galleria. The concrete foundation pour alone was historic, requiring tens of thousands of cubic meters of specialized mix to combat groundwater salinity. But today, it stands as a monument to stranded investment. If you want the raw data on buildings that were too ambitious, too expensive, or too fundamentally flawed to survive the gap between promise and reality, hit subscribe. We release new breakdowns every week. The timeline of collapse. The structural anatomy of this failure began with a historic engineering feat that rapidly devolved into a logistical nightmare. Ground was broken in late 2015 under a top-tier international general contractor to anchor 3 massive towers weighing hundreds of thousands of tons into the loose, hyper-saline coastal sand of Dubai. Engineers executed one of the largest continuous mat foundation pours in the region's history. For over 48 hours straight, a non-stop convoy of concrete mixers poured over 26,000 cubic yards of specialized, sulfate-resistant concrete reinforced by 6 million pounds of heavy-gauge rebar. By 2018, the raw concrete skeletons had topped out at 230 meters, dramatically altering the marina skyline. Marketing campaigns blasted global investors with promises of private sky pools, a 2-acre elevated wellness deck, and indoor multi-sport arenas. But behind the glitz, the core engineering was already failing due to environmental exposure. In Dubai, an unsealed, unconditioned skyscraper is a ticking clock. Without active HVAC systems to control interior climates, the extreme summer heat, often exceeding 45 degrees Celsius, caused severe thermal expansion. Steel reinforcement bars inside the exposed upper floors began expanding at different rates than the curing concrete, inducing microscopic fractures. Simultaneously, the relentless, salt-laden marine humidity from the Arabian Gulf penetrated the unsealed structure. This moisture triggered premature corrosion on exposed structural joints and caused intense glass fatigue as the massive exterior glazing panels warped under intense, uneven thermal pressure. Then, the cash flow dried up entirely. The consortium had structured its financing on continuous cycles of international capital. When global liquidity markets tightened and sudden foreign regulatory shifts choked offshore fund transfers, the project lost its oxygen. By late 2019, the cranes stopped moving. Unpaid subcontractors walked off the site, leaving high-performance glass pallets and vital mechanical equipment exposed on the lower podium floors. The primary developer's financial structure shattered, racking up over $400 million in localized structural debt, paralyzing sister projects across Business Bay and downtown. The hyper-luxury oasis was suddenly reduced to an abandoned concrete shell, completely vulnerable to the desert winds and structural decay. The real estate illusion freezing of this triple tower complex exposed a systemic fracture in how hyper-luxury real estate intersects with urban reality. This wasn't an isolated corporate failure. It was a structural collision between massive speculative capital and local infrastructure. While the abandoned towers sat gathering dust and experiencing active glass fatigue, the surrounding district continued its relentless growth, creating a jarring contrast directly across the street. High-end commercial hubs and pristine waterfront promenades operated at maximum capacity, while the single 4.6-acre footprint devolved into a massive multi-million-dollar liability. Because the tower's perimeter security was routinely compromised, local municipal authorities were forced to step in, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on auxiliary reinforcement, security details, and perimeter screening. A project pitched as a massive economic catalyst had effectively become a public maintenance drain. The crisis became even more acute when analyzed alongside the region's intense demand for actual, functional residential inventory. As the market surged through the mid-2020s, over 500 premium units sat completely offline, frozen in legal limbo. The legal machinery of bankruptcy courts and international creditor claims are notoriously rigid. They cannot easily liquidate or repurpose a half-built asset, no matter how much the surrounding district requires the space. Furthermore, the funding mechanism itself revealed deep vulnerabilities. A substantial portion of the initial capital had been raised through specialized investor visa programs, where foreign buyers injected hundreds of thousands of dollars directly into the project in exchange for residency perks. When the developer defaulted, these international micro-investors found themselves completely wiped out, trapped behind major institutional lenders and general contractors in the multi-tiered debt hierarchy. The site became a silent monument to the risk of hyper-leveraged development. It laid bare the reality of the global property market. When international financing lines are severed, even the most technologically advanced ultra-luxury master plan can be instantly transformed into an unusable stack of concrete, glass, and unpayable debt. The voices in the wind. To truly grasp the human and financial devastation of this shutdown, you have to look past the corporate balance sheets and listen to the people left stranded in the wake of the collapse. For every megastructure that dies mid-construction, there is a hidden web of subcontractors, individual investors, and site engineers whose lives are permanently upended. Take the story of Marcus, a senior structural consultant who spent 3 years managing the initial foundation work. He recalls the mounting dread on site during the final months of 2019. First, specialized equipment rentals were abruptly delayed. Then, highly specific diagnostic tools used to monitor the foundation's load-bearing integrity on the soft coastal sand were recalled by suppliers due to non-payment. According to Marcus, the final blow came when the site's primary power generators were cut. Within days, a workforce of over 2,000 laborers and engineers evaporated, leaving a silent, half-finished monument to corporate overreach. Worse still is the plight of the individual expat buyers. Under the promise of guaranteed long-term residency visas and high-yield rental returns, hundreds of middle-tier foreign investors poured their life savings into off-plan purchases. A retired British couple, who invested over $600,000 into a promised 2-bedroom apartment on the 30th floor, found themselves completely locked out of any recourse. Because the project was funded through a complex maze of offshore holding companies, these fractional buyers have spent years navigating expensive legal tribunals, only to discover that their names sit at the absolute bottom of the creditor repayment ladder. Meanwhile, the physical structure itself became an attractive nuisance for extreme urban explorers. Before municipal security was heavily reinforced, international base jumpers and rooftoppers routinely infiltrated the unmonitored site. Breathtaking, highly dangerous footage began circulating on social media. Individuals leaping from the raw 40th-story concrete ledges, parachuting down into the narrow, crowded streets of the marina below. The site had transformed. It was no longer a symbol of elite architectural achievement, but a chaotic, lawless playground for adrenaline seekers. A stark, public reminder that a multi-million-dollar private playground had defaulted into a massive public safety hazard. The hard deadline, the legal battle over the carcass of this triple tower complex, has turned into a high-stakes race against time. By early 2024, a consortium of unpaid contractors filed a massive involuntary bankruptcy petition, forcing the project into a court-supervised liquidation process. Secured bank claims topped $200 million, while contractor debts and frozen investor funds pushed the total liabilities well past the actual market value of the half-finished asset. A comprehensive structural appraisal valued the complex in its current state at roughly $434 million. However, the engineering cost to actually finish the structures, which have sat rotting in the coastal humidity for over 6 years, is estimated at an additional $865 million. Extreme heat expansion, internal water damage, and glass fatigue mean that large sections of the existing MEP infrastructure must be completely ripped out and rebuilt from scratch. This brings us to the hard reality of 26. A local development partnership has stepped forward with a $470 million purchase agreement. But the legal machinery is grinding incredibly slowly. The total capital required to bring these towers to market will now easily breach the $2 billion mark, double the original budget, and the clock is ticking loudly. The city is rapidly approaching major global summits and international expos designed to showcase its flawless, ultra-modern infrastructure. The last thing authorities want visible on global broadcasts is a massive, hollow, three-tower scar right in the middle of its premier waterfront tourist corridor. It has been over a decade since the first historic concrete pour anchored these towers into the sand. Today, the cranes are still frozen, the units are still empty, and the structural integrity degrades with every passing summer. Whether these towers will ever be completed, or if they will remain a permanent monument to the limits of hyper-leveraged ambition, is a question that remains entirely open.